Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. Welcome to Your Teen for Parents Magazine, Tuesdays with Kamira. We are live 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday, March 1st. I'm so excited today. We're talking college stuff, but I want to remind you that if you are joining us live, you are welcome to place comments and questions in the comment section, and I will be looking for those, and our guest will address them live on Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. If you are watching a playback, you're welcome to put comments in the comment section and dialogue with other people who are also doing that, but our guests will not be there because they are only here on Tuesday morning. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Cassandra. Hi, Susan. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Today, we are talking about the benefits of third-party assistance with the college admissions process. Before we do that, I would like each of our guests to tell us a little bit about herself. Let's start with Cassandra and then Susan.
Hi, I'm Cassondra Preer Taylor, and I am the founder and CEO of Taylor Co., which is an ed tech company that helps veterans find their second careers in technology. I've had multiple careers in my past: Navy, financial services with American Express, JP Morgan Chase, um, as well as process engineering with GE and several other companies. I was a college coach in Austin, Texas for 7 years. This is how I got involved with this topic.
Wow. I am Susan Kolodkin. My life is not nearly as interesting as Cassandra's. I am an attorney, and I have been an attorney for almost 40 years. I am interested in this topic mostly because I have two children who are in college right now, and dealing with that process with children who aren't necessarily exactly the way that I was led me to think outside the box about how best to deal with this issue.
Great. Just so people know, both Cassandra and Susan come from my personal life, hence why I know an attorney and a Navy vet to talk about college admissions process. Cassandra, I didn't know volunteered in this capacity until she let me know, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. Susan has been part of my mommy circle for years now. We used to be part of a walking group, and she used to try to get me to stand down when I would get hyped up about academics and the college admissions process. And one of the best pieces of advice she gave me is to engage third-party assistance when it was time, not when she was telling me because it was too early then, but when it was time. And I am eternally grateful for that advice. Let's begin. So we know the college admissions process is increasingly confusing with each class. Those of us who've had kids go through it already know that this time around, it's not the same. It's different because of COVID. It was different before COVID. It's just the way it is. Why don't we begin with, Cassandra, why don't you tell us what third-party assistance is?
Yes. So I got started in this program, in this field, with a company called Breakthrough Austin. They're a nonprofit that would help particularly low-income students who were trying to go to college for the first time. They didn't have any assistance. Their parents couldn't help them in this process because they hadn't gone. So what we would do is start early, which is why I recommend people start early, um, through a program, paid or non-paid. What we would do is to help them to think about their college choices in terms of what you want to do, which colleges, financials. I found that people always forget about the financials. People go, "Whoo, my kid's in college," and guess what? You got to pay for it. So we would walk them through all of those processes to help those students get in, because half the battle was not just getting into college. It was half the battle was the financial aid process and the things that happen after they get an acceptance letter. We would help them with things such as what do you do and what to anticipate, what's the orientation process. And a lot of times helping these kids get to colleges, because you may think I want to go to this college until you get on the campus and realize it's not for you. So those is an iterative process that takes several months. And the college coaches, if you can't get a college kid there, personally, there are virtual tours. You got to get a kid exposed to the entire process very early on.
And how early is early?
I recommend at some capacity, ninth grade. You don't have to pay for these resources. There are free resources in every city, every state. The reason I say early on is because you kind of can't wait until your junior year to get involved with your community service, to start figuring out which courses, to figure out these things. Because by the time you get to your junior year, you may not have enough time. So a person can say, if I know I want to go to a certain school, I can tell, and I work with a student, I can tell them, we need to get you into geometry in this year so you can get a calculus class in because that's what you need to get in to be more competitive. By the time you wait until your junior year, there's not enough time to take, you can't wait till then anyway. You got to schedule, you can't sit down one day and say, oh my gosh, I'm gonna take the SAT test tomorrow. That's not how that works. Um, you have to plan and backdate those. And again, I cannot stress enough, there are free resources out there. So when I say early, you don't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars or even hundreds of dollars to get your child into these programs. You just have to find something, a free resource in your community, and make sure your child is engaged. And again, to your point, Kamira, as soon as you get a third party involved, as a parent, it's much easier for you.
Okay, Susan, so you have experience with this. Susan went through this twice recently, within the last 5 years. Tell us what your experience was like using third-party assistant and why your family decided to go that route.
Okay, so my experience was different than Cassondra's. My husband and I were both academically driven. My husband went to Harvard, I went to Northwestern. We assumed our children would be similar, and they weren't. My son has never been a student. My daughter is a good student, mostly because she fundamentally likes school, but she has always thought that grades are silly and kids who are interested in all this stuff early are silly. And it was difficult for us to walk that tightrope of wanting to motivate them to be serious about this process, but not wanting to push them to a place where they wanted nothing to do with this process. And my daughter at one point, as a junior, I actually finally said to her, do you not want to go to college? Because if you don't want to go, I'm okay with that. I mean, there are other paths. There are paths of waiting a few years because, unfortunately, all children are supposed to go to college out of high school, and not all children at the age of 18 or 19 are ready to get out of college what college has to offer. So in our case, what I found was it was helpful to start with the studying for standardized test process, to have somebody who helped my kids do that, even if it wasn't about, actually getting them to where they could do better on these tests. It was just a person who would sit down with them and take that time so that I didn't have to say to them, hey, go study for that test. And what occurred to me, because both of them really liked the tutors who they used, was that it was worth it to me to pay those people to sit down with my children to fill out college applications and to give them ideas about colleges, so that that wasn't coming from me. Even though I would say I've always had a good relationship with my children, I think there's a natural tendency, if I say, why don't you consider Northwestern, for your children to say, why don't I consider any school but Northwestern? And with these third parties, that didn't happen. And so particularly my son would tell you that it wasn't that he couldn't think to write his own essays for his applications, but because Andrew came Saturday at 11 till noon or 1 or whatever, that was the time Zach sat down and focused on getting the application done and out the door. And I didn't have to pester him because that's when Andrew was coming. And that was a huge, that's kind of what I was talking about with you, Kamira. That was huge for us. And it was to deal with that stress of your kids who aren't necessarily approaching the process either the way you did or the way you wish you had or the way you wanted them to, because we all want our kids to follow a certain path.
I love that, the way you want them to or you wish you had. I'm really guilty of that. Like, I want you to do so much better than I did. Don't make these mistakes. And, now I'm making a mistake by putting that on you.
Absolutely.
If you are watching this and you're hearing this, Susan chose to pay. There are other routes to go. There are creative ways to do this. So don't jump off and say, this is just for people who are paying, and for whatever reason, I'm choosing not to pay. Stick with us because we have other information to share with you via the comment section and with our two guests speaking. So don't leave us just yet. And remember, if you have a question or comment, please put in the comment section. I'll be looking for those. What should families who are interested in having a third party, an independent college counselor, we're talking about the traditional independent counselor, admissions counselor, what should they look for? Say, okay, I think this is what I want to do. What should they look for? Go ahead, Cassondra.
I would actually be interested in hear what Susan says because she had to look for somebody. As on the other hand, people came to me, and I don't know why they came to me, other than the fact that I literally had a parent stop me once on the street in my neighborhood and says, "Are you Cassondra?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she says, "I heard about you. Can you help my child?" And I'm like, and they had gone to college, and I had another friend who came to me and said the same thing. They were Wharton graduates, but they wanted me to help because, to Susan's point and to your point, Kamara, they didn't really want to have to deal with their children that way. And I don't blame them. So it's just a matter of that you're able to sometimes get better results out of children who aren't yours than the parent can. And it's just stress free. So I would tell people, honestly, someone who can write helps because you definitely want someone who can proofread that child's essay. With ACT and SATs admissions testing now maybe waning off in some schools, that is replaced by something else. Something else or sometimes essays, because you have to show that something else has to take their place. So someone who's a good writer enough so to pull the information out of your child, because kids have spent their entire high school trying to fit in, to belong. Now, when they're applying for college, it's not the time to fit in, and you got to stand out. So someone who can read an essay and pull that out of your child, that uniqueness helps. Somebody who has a good rapport with your child helps. If your child is going to be just as stilted with that person as they are with you, it's not working. So it may take a college coach or two to find that right person who can bring that best out of your child, get your child talking. I found with my nieces, I wasn't the best person. I was still family. So you may have to find a person who is the better resource. So the biggest thing, one, is rapport, I think. Number two is someone who does, again, I cannot stress enough the essays, because the essays is where you are your most individual. You will always find kids who have grades are as good as yours, as many community service projects, and all this wealth of things they've done through on their college resume. But the essay is that one space you get to talk about who you are and why you belong in that space. So having someone who can pull that out of your child and get it on paper and then proofread it to make sure that it tells a good story is fairly essential.
Susan, what was your experience? What did you look for?
So Cassondra, it's interesting because I would agree with you that the number one thing for me is rapport. And again, some of that is going to depend on your child. If your child is super self-motivated and wants to go to Harvard more than anything in the world, you're probably going to have an easier time finding a coach or any person, whether it's somebody you pay or somebody you don't pay, who's going to motivate them because they're already motivated. In the case of my children, they weren't as motivated. And so finding someone who resonated with them was most important. And what happened for us, both of my children have ADHD, pretty significant. And I had heard of a tutor from a friend of mine who worked at the Howard School that was particularly good helping children with ADHD take standardized tests, because a lot of times what can happen is that a kid can get so tunneled into one question that they lose the rest of the test. So I called this woman, and she was lovely, and my son thought she was incredibly weird, and she was a little weird, but she was not the right person for him. again, and he could say, oh, Wendy did fine helping him take the test. He ended up doing very well on his ACT, so clearly that was a positive. But there was a kid that he had used as a math tutor in junior high school. So not that much older than Zach, also an athlete, similar to Zach in a lot of ways. And interestingly, I mean, he had been a very good student, but he had gotten into a lot of trouble in college and found his way out of it. He was the perfect person for Zach because he was somebody that Zach could relate to and Zach was willing to listen to. My daughter, on the other hand, loved Wendy. And the two of them would sit and have these wonderful conversations about all sorts of things. And so when it came time to work on applications and to think about school potential, this school versus that school, Wendy was a great resource for Ellie because Ellie wanted to hear everything she had to say. And I also agree with Cassondra about finding somebody that can help your child basically produce the best essay or an essay that tells their story. And I would say this, there is this temptation to feel like you have to write the most interesting, different, at least as I understand it. I'm not an admissions professional, but that's really not the way to go. When I was in college and interested in law school, I heard somebody speak who had been on the admissions board of Harvard Law School and was then on the admissions board at Northwestern Law School. And he said, no matter how unique you think this essay is, we've read it before. So just write about yourself. He said the only essay that ever sort of struck him with its uniqueness was a kid who I guess had written about how his girlfriend had broken up with him and it devastated him so that he invested all of his mental energy into cooking and had learned to crack 2 eggs in one hand at the same time. And this guy said, I literally destroyed 4 dozen eggs trying to see if I could do it. He said, but of all the essays I read, and I've read a gazillion of them, that was the only one that really struck me. So I mean, that obviously happened a long time ago, but I took that to heart and sort of encouraged my children to write about who they really were and not, again, some fantasized version of themselves. But finding somebody who can help them do that is important.
I third that instead of second that, finding somebody who can help them be authentic in writing their essay, because everyone I've spoken with has said it's not about listing your accomplishments, it's about telling us who you are. And if you can find a real creative way to do that, that's a bonus. Since I've just gone through this whole process, I'm going to say that, and I use third-party assistants. I wanted the good rapport, like you said, somebody, but also so a good fit personality wise, but I also wanted somebody who would help my student find a good fit school for their personality, somebody who knew the schools better than I did. We, visited schools casually whenever we were somewhere. If we were visiting family, we would visit a college in that area or something, but really somebody who could listen and hear my student in a way that I couldn't because I am prejudiced, I'm the parent and all these things, and say, it sounds like you may like this school. And it may not be a school that I would have considered. So I wanted somebody who to open the world to them, basically. And that was helpful. You said something, Susan. You said that your son, Zach, used an older student to help him prep. And that is one of our creative ideas, that it doesn't have to be paying for one of these services. If you can pay for them, yay. But if you don't want to, or if you can't, that was one creative alternative. Can you guys give me a couple of other creative alternatives to the traditional consulting services?
I mean, I would also say if there is a family member who isn't you, I know Cassondra said that she wasn't necessarily the right person for her nieces, and they might not be, but I mean, I can tell you that my children, and maybe it helps that I'm the youngest in my family, so my siblings' children are older than my children. My children have always looked up to their cousins. And so they were also a great source of advice. And, wherever it was they had gone to college, they could give their insights on what they liked or didn't like, be it being in a big city, not being in a big city, having a school with a campus, no campus, sports team, no sports team. whatever that is, you probably have resources in your family who have insights that are helpful, worth sharing. So that's one idea to me that my kids used.
The other one is, generally speaking, your children are involved with clubs and societies. If there's someone they connect with, let's say they're a Girl Scout, and they've grown up this, or a Boy Scout, and they connected with that troop leader, then guess what? That troop leader just became that person who can help them out with some pieces, because that troop leader, we were part of a National Black MBA, and they had a program called Leaders of Tomorrow, which we take these high school kids through, a journey all through high school in terms of business. Well, a lot of the folks in that program ended up becoming mentors to these kids, because we had all gone to college and most of us could help. And there's usually someone on that panel who you clicked with. So if whoever you clicked with, you went to and said, "Hey, I'm trying," and you could have that honest conversation, which sometimes led to some uncomfortable conversations with parents, because some parents desperately want their children to go where I went to school, as you said, Susan, or they have to go here, go do this. And that's when you have to go tell that parent, your child really does not want to go there, or to do this. And they don't want to become a doctor. They really want to go into school and become an architect. So can we find this middle ground? But yes, your children belong, if your children are college bound, they generally belong to some kind of society or some kind of club. Those clubs are great resources for your child to find someone they connect with. To your point, another student who's already at college, a mentor who's in those programs. Sometimes, if there is someone at church, you just need someone, who is, again, has a rapport. That's the most important thing, and someone who can walk them through. If that mentor does not have all the technical skills, in terms of, I need to know which financial skills that I need to have in order to point them in these directions or these resources, they can find them, because they got more resources than your child does. So the nice thing is, once you get someone who your child will be able to open up to, establish a rapport with, it's on them to help that child find the right resources at school. Because I've had to literally, for one of the children I had to go to her school and partner with another teacher to say, she does not have enough credits to graduate. So what can we do? We're 3 months out. What can we do? And between the two of us, we partner together to find how to get this child through the system. So there are lots of resources. Once your child finds someone they trust, that resource should be good enough to figure out the rest of the way, the rest of the story.
We're going to put some resources that we found in the comment section. Each resource isn't for everyone, but they give you an idea of the type of programs that are out there. And as research goes, once you click onto one thing, you go down the rabbit hole and you may find something that helps you. Another tip is retired teachers. Somebody told me that one. Retired teachers love to be called upon to help in these kind of things. They love to be called upon, period, I've found out. And if you have someone, don't just think about someone who went to schools or whatever. If you have a really organized person in your world, that person can help organize your student, because the college admissions process involves spreadsheets and tracking things and stuff. And that's usually where the families get into the fights because that information is not flowing the way it should. So if you have somebody else who can help you do that, so think creatively. A person in a field that your child may be interested in or doing an activity, it doesn't mean that your student is going to, tunnel focus and become the best professional, whatever. I have a musician who decided late in the game that he didn't want to be a musician, but still wanted to be involved in the music world, utilizing other liberal arts type skills, and actually through somebody else met somebody who's in that world, and was able to say, oh, I can introduce you to these people. And by the way, this school is great for that. You can do music and still have your liberal arts. This school is great for that. Things that I would not have known because that's not the world I inhabit. Cassondra, why don't you tell us what it looks like when you work with a student? Our time is winding down, but just tell us what it looks like when you work.
Sure. We start building a profile. And that profile includes several different things. It includes things such as, I have to go back and catch myself. What colleges are you interested in? What are their requirements? What are their mission rates? What are their timelines? Because those are very important. What's their cost? because we have to work with the parents in that case. So we start building a profile of the different colleges. And to your point, that's a spreadsheet. Then we start to backtrack it and figure out and put together a calendar based on what needs to be done at what point. We figure out at that point that we want to do a college, a visit, because to me that's a very important part of it, because a kid gets to feel how that feels. It's one thing that to see this glorified college on paper on the internet. When you go to visit, you may say, "This is not my place." My middle son, in fact, had a full scholarship, full room, board, everything, courtesy of a perfect score in the SAT. And got to the campus and decided it wasn't for him. Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh no, don't say that, because you got a full ride to the school. That needs to be for you." uh,
I hear you.
but but it wasn't for him. So we found an alternative for him that worked for him, and it was perfect. So that is a timeline. You figure out that timeline. You start looking at their grades. You're looking at what they have to get done, and you back it all into it, because what you want to do is create a scenario where your child fits most of the requirements that they need. You're not going to fit all the requirements every single time. I mean, when you say that I have a 36 on the ACT, and I have this and that, and I should be able to get to Harvard easily. Harvard still takes people who might have something that's a little bit more unique than you to bring something to the class that's not been filled. So you can never say 100% of anything. We try to backtrack to fill out, make sure we have everything we need, enough of what we need to make your child a really strong candidate. And if we don't think we are, we have to look for some alternatives as well to make sure that you get into a college you're going to be happy with. We start working on the essays really early, because the essays take a long time, because I find that the essays are where a child writes something and you're like, this doesn't cut it. This is so, you're so trying so hard to belong here. We're not staying you out. So that takes a long time to pull out that unique piece. So we have to back it all up. So I put it in the spreadsheet. It starts with a spreadsheet for me, so we can make sure we don't miss any widgets, because the last thing you want to figure out is that you miss something at the last minute and you don't have time to figure out how to get it done. And that spreadsheet includes financials. I would never want to saddle a child, especially one who is not from wealthy parents, with the debt that comes with college. So we start very early on, identifying the same track, that same pattern, that same profile. We start a no profile right away, looking at scholarships, and we target right away. And I will add one thing that's not, you didn't ask for here, which is, if you don't ask for more money when your child gets into college, you will never get more money. And so we always go back and leave some time in there to figure out where we are in terms of financials and what we need. And then we go back and ask. Because I found that once one of the colleges told a kid, "Well, we don't have any more money." I said, "Well, here's what," and I kept pushing. And next thing you know, she reduced it. So her total intake out of $44,000 a year for tuition came down to nothing more than 10. They gave her the rest of that was all scholarship money, and we had to ask, and we had to go sit in there, and I had pretty much told them, "I'm not leaving here until you find a way to get her more money." And I didn't do that just once; I did that twice. And once I went and sat in the college president's office and said, "I'm not leaving here until we figure this out." And he came through, and he gave me a personal note to go back to financial aid. I went financial aid. Next thing we know, we had money. So you have to ask. So that timeline includes two: the colleges and what you need, and the financials, because you have to think about both.
Okay, I'm going to tell our audience, if you choose to go to a college president's office, don't tell them your teen sent you there. You may want to do that, but don't tell them that we told you to do that. And also, we spend, and this happens in college discussions all the time. You spend a lot of time talking about the most prestigious schools. It's just the way these conversations go. That is not what we're talking about. That is not what the getting third-party assistance is about. It's about making it through the process, finding what's best for you, finding out how you're going to make your students stand out and what they want. So even though we think, oh, we're investing in this so that our kid can go to an Ivy or a prestigious school somewhere, or the best school for whatever, that's not really what it is. It's about having your students shine and finding out what it is they really want to do, and having somebody else intervene which was really, really helpful for us. We didn't do that with older children, but the process was different with our older children. And when Susan advised me with the younger, I'm so glad she did, because the process is very different now. And it's a lot more complicated. It was straightforward for a long time. And about the school visits, I know some of you are out there going, I can't hop around the country visiting. A good piece of advice that I received from a counselor once is that if you are near any major urban area, or some people live in an ex-urban area that has a lot of campuses, there are schools that you can visit locally. Your student may not want to go to them, but they can go on a campus and figure out what it feels like to be on a large campus, what it feels like to be on a small campus. It may not be the large and small campus that they're thinking of applying to, but they can get a feel for what schools feel like. Because the truth is, if you visit too many schools, your child will tell you they all look alike. After a while, they all start to look alike. So you don't have to spend too much resource there. You can do the virtual tours and do the physical tours at home. If you're able to visit, that's great, because you can observe your child. We are at the end of our time, but I want to ask you, I do this with everyone, if there's one thing that somebody should remember after hearing this 30-minute conversation, and it's the only thing they remember, one takeaway, what should it be? Susan?
There isn't only one right choice for school. So don't feel like if your kid doesn't go to X, college is ruined. And obviously money's important, but there's a lot to be learned out there. And it isn't always physics or chemistry. I mean, I can tell you that my son is at a school where, I mean, he went to a small private school in Atlanta that had a certain profile of student. He's now at a large public school with a completely different kind of student. He works for the football team. He's met kids who spent their high school years homeless and eating out of dumpsters. And that is not something he saw. He's learned so much. And it's not the school that I necessarily would have chosen for him when he was in the 9th grade, but it's been an amazing experience. And so try to take a step back and remember that there are a lot of right choices.
And I would say, again, to start early, because there's so much now that the rules are changing every single day. And Kamara's already talked about that several times. They're changing. So the earlier you start, the earlier you can start getting prepared. As a bonus, I would say, trust your kid. You have to let your kids do this. The natural tendency as a parent is to step in and say, I'm going to, even with a college coach, to step in and try to overlook and oversee. Trust your child. They're your children. You raised them. Trust them to be able to do the right thing, to find a good choice for them, and to give them a little bit of freedom to work with that coach. And to work it all out. And but you need to trust your children a little bit and let them do it. I can't still talk about the number of parents who still want to jump in and to help write the essays and help. Your child's got this. They're going to do this. They're going to be fine.
Your child's going to be fine. And if they decide that the choice wasn't the best choice, they can transfer. Remind yourselves that. You don't have to remind them. They know that. Remind yourselves they are not locked in. This is not going to determine everything for the rest of their lives. They can transfer if they decide it wasn't the good choice, because really you don't know until you're there and you live the experience. My one takeaway from the two of you is that help is good. It's the same thing I tell kids when they go to school. Make sure you access TAs and go to office hours. Help is good. You don't have to do it all yourself, and you don't have to necessarily go the expensive consultant route. Think creatively about who can help you, and then ask for it, because people don't know what to give you until you ask, and most people are honored when you ask. Cassondra, Susan, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for allowing me to pull you out of my private life.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, same.
You're welcome. Tomorrow we have coffee with Jen and Sharon. They are two moms who dish about parenting and parenting life and parenting teens. They have a topic of the day. It's fun. You should come with your hot beverage or another type of beverage that you're not going to tell us about and have a talk with them. Sometimes we need that for parenting these teens. Thanks a lot. I appreciate your help. Thanks for watching.
Thanks. Bye.